everyone, welcome to today's show. So on today, I've got Shane Paull. Shane is the Managing Director of the South for McCarthy Stone. So McCarthy Stone are the UK's leading developer and manager of retirement properties. They've created over 58,000 properties with revenues of over 725 million. So Shane has got an incredibly interesting insight in what it takes to become a property leader within such a large organisation. And I really hope you enjoy today's show and check it out. Thank you very much. Shane Paull, thanks very much for joining the podcast today. Good to see you.
No worries, okay. Tim. Thank you.
First of all, what we're going to get started off with is a question that I like to ask everyone. So what is the definition of a leader to you?
What is the definition of a leader? Someone who inspires people. I don't think they necessarily have to be the best person in the class of the subject matter of what they do, but they should be able to inspire people, make people go the extra mile. Yeah, I think it's changed a lot over the year what it looks like. You know, they're not a dictator as such, but they should be someone that people look up to. Their behaviours should be right, and they should be a good listening board. I think that the more I've realised that the longer you work for and the higher up you go, it's more about listening than it is about actually talking and telling people what to do. So I'm gonna listen for the next hour, Tim.
You're the leader, my friend. So this is about you today, unfortunately. So that's really interesting. So do you think that when you first started back in property, the way that people would lead was more of a not as kind of it wasn't a democracy, it was more autocratic?
I'll give you a football analogy because I know you'll understand that. So I thought that when I started, you had to be like the midfield general, you know, being able to see all parts of the pitch, being involved in everything, being the captain. Actually, you shouldn't even be on the pitch, and it's debatable whether you should even be on the sideline. You probably should be up in the stands looking on, and that's what as soon as I realised that you can't do everything, you can't be everywhere, I think that completely changed my leadership style, because you can't, it's just not possible. So and you'll see that across all levels of business. You say that horrible business speak around helicopter view and all of that, but effectively that is what it is. So yeah, I thought I should be like Roy Keane when I started, and actually it's a lot better to be sat in the stands.
Do you think that has a lot to do with the company culture that's created that allows you to sit on the sidelines, as you say?
Well, no, it's around the type of leader you want to be. So if you want to be someone who empowers people, trusts people, then you've got those touch points where you should be able to influence them and speak to them about what they're going to do. But ultimately, they're the people that you are going to do, that are going to do the work. And I think that was another point when the penny sort of dropped for me, is that I would suddenly realise at the end of the day, why am I telling this person what to do? I pay them X £1,000 a year for them to do this work. If I just do it, or I pay someone a lot less money to just do as I say, and again, that's not leadership.
I think it's not. Yeah, it's not rewarding for people, is it, as well? Because they want to have that job satisfaction. I think if you're just telling someone what to do and they've got no ability to be creative, I think that's really. Do you think that's important for people now, that they feel that they've got?
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah. I see it as that I set the guidelines that they can work within, but it's down to them about how they achieve what objectives we agree they need to achieve within those guidelines.
To give the listeners a little bit of context. So, in your organisation, how many people are sort of you responsible for in your organisation at McCarthy Stone?
Currently about 300.
About probably 300. So, and how
yeah,
304 exactly. So how
uh,
How is that as as someone who's a leader? Um, how does that feel as a responsibility?
I don't really think about that much, Tim. I mean, it's you got to make sure the processes are in place. As I said, you set the guidelines, you set the processes up, you make sure the
Mm,
processes can work. And I think that's been one of the advantages of the last year. It's enabled us to step away and actually see how much of the system and the processes can work without that sort of day to day someone sitting
yeah.
all over them. And actually, there's been some really robust processes which have
Mm,
worked very well and enabled us to
mm.
work remotely. And there's been some other things that we probably need to look at and see if there's a better way of working.
Could you expand on that? What are the types of things that you think, if you give an
Oh,
example?
it's very if well we've done a planning application during lockdown for the Wimborne market for over 100
Yeah.
units. Well, you try and review a planning application and all the drawings
Mm,
on a screen or two screens. It's just not possible. So we may have had a COVID meeting looking over the drawings,
yeah.
good old fashioned
Mm,
drawings on the desk and having a look at them because it's just not possible. So we need to look at see if there's any technological advantages or changes that we can take advantage of. But that's been the hardest bit, and that and trusting people. That goes back to being a leader again. So I trust them that they have all been doing their
mm.
work correctly over this last
Do you
12
think
months.
people, because there's a lot of conversations in the media and a lot of studies being shown about kind of that, what do people want now? What do team members want? Do they want to work from home? Do they want to work from the office? What's within your organization? What's the feedback?
Yeah, we well we did we literally just finished some studies around that. I mean, it won't surprise people to hear that there is a preference from working
Mm,
from home now, which I can understand. I mean, I never worked from home. I mean, you know me quite well. I've never been a person who's worked
mm,
from home at all, and even I've found it quite advantageous at times and quite enjoyable. So yeah, you have got a lot of people that want to do that. What are we going to do? We're going to end up with a hybrid model. I think we're going to encourage people into meetings in the office. We're going to use the office in Ringwood as more of a
mm,
collaboration hub. So people might come in for a meeting at 11 for a couple of hours, but then they might head off at 2. And I think we're just going to be far more trusting of people about how they
mm.
spend their time. I think that we used to have 65 people in the office every Monday. That's not
Yeah,
going to happen.
that's it's really
Just
interesting
not.
what you said
Yeah.
about collaboration hub, because ultimately I think that's something that people really miss, don't they? From even from what we're doing now online, I think that people have really missed that social interaction, haven't they? As a lot of
Oh yeah, I think there's two areas for me that really caused me a concern over the last year. One is people's mental health around this
mm,
sort of interaction, and I've got a number of staff. It's the youngsters I'm probably more concerned about, who live on their own and probably had a great social life up
mm,
until a year ago and have just seen their world shrink
yeah,
ridiculously small. Um, that concerns me. And then the other element, which I think is has been underlooked at the moment, is that a lot of people, again in their early part of their careers, they need mentoring, they need coaching, and they've missed that sort of 10-minute grab a chat, poke their head around the door, ask a question. They just haven't been
mm,
able to do that. So part of me thinks I know we're going to have to spend some time in the next year re-energizing, learning, catching up with people to see where their development is, and really focus on that because basically, they have lost a year's worth of experience.
absolutely. No, it completely makes sense, doesn't it? It has. I kind of feel the same, that for people that need more mentoring, you've got different types of team members, haven't you? Some that are a lot more experienced, and then you've got, like you said, the younger team members that are just sort of starting out in their careers. And I think that's something
Mm.
important for us to highlight now, because hopefully some of the people that will be listening are going to be, young kind of property professionals that are looking to sort of advance in their career. So I think that's really interesting that, you know, those are probably the people that need more support, and how are companies going to support those people in this hybrid kind of environment that we're going to have moving forward, isn't it?
Yeah, and the answer is not
Mm.
e-learning either. You know, e-learning is just as dull as sat at
Yeah,
home on your own with your screens. So no, when the time is right, we need to. Well, I know we'll be doing a lot of workshops, and we'll just be working with people to see exactly where their development
yeah, no,
gaps
that's really
are.
interesting. So that kind of leads me on to my next question, Shane, actually. So, you know, looking back in the last, say, what we now, we're in March, so we're probably just over a year into the pandemic, and hopefully we're coming out of it really, really soon. Um, what's been what's been some of the challenges? I mean, you've talked around some of the challenges already, inadvertently, but and what's been some of the biggest opportunities, you know, for you guys as a company?
Well, the big challenge was all around IT. I mean, I remember having the meeting beginning of March where we were talking about what could
Mm,
possibly happen. We looked around the office, and you know, a lot of the office still worked off
yeah,
desktops. They didn't necessarily have laptops. You know, we got quite restrictive firewalls
as
at work, as you and I have found out
yeah,
this morning, trying to get onto this page. And yeah, the big issue was IT, and we were quite you know, we're quite open about it. We were quite a
yeah,
technological
yeah,
dinosaur, really. We didn't use very few members of staff had iPads. You know, of course, I had iPad
mm,
and iPhones, but not many of my teams had all of that. So we had to do a very quick rollout of
mm,
IT equipment. At the time, we were using Skype, which again was rarely being used. We used that for probably the first 6 weeks
yeah,
of lockdown one. And then we rolled out Teams, which has just been a far better platform for us to work from. So we're predominantly a Teams-based
yeah,
business at the moment. Um, and yeah, that's worked. Like I say, there are things that we're not doing, and there are things that we probably do a
yeah,
bit slower. But if someone had told me that this is how well we would work remotely at the beginning, I would have been chuffed to bits. I just didn't think there
yeah,
would have been. I would have said
mm,
it wasn't possible. So that was the big challenge. Some of the benefits, there's a real strange benefit, which when you explain it to people, they sort of look at you to think, well, didn't you
mm,
do that anyway? Um, but on the actual building sites themselves, we locked our sites down for 6 weeks, and then we started them up again in a slightly staggered approach. Um, but when we were doing that, the COVID ways of working on site meant you had to put one-way
mm,
systems in around the developments. The tradesmen were only allowed in the apartments one at a time. So instead of, if you went to one of our building sites 2 years ago, it would look like organised chaos. There, wherever you would
yeah,
look, there would be workmen or
yeah,
work ladies, workmen, and it'd be like
yeah,
ants everywhere. And all of a sudden, we had to put the system in that says, no, you've got to go
yeah,
in that way. You must come out of the
mm,
apartment and turn right. You can't come out of the apartment and turn left. You can, you know, we can say to the electrician, right, that apartment is yours now for the
mm,
rest of the day. The decorator's not allowed in until
mm,
9 a.m. tomorrow. So we've worked to a sequence, and you know, you wouldn't believe it.
mm.
It sounds crazy. You know, why do you do that anyway? But the quality's
So have you
better
found that? So
as
the
well.
efficiency of how the build is that in terms, yeah,
Oh yeah,
would
completely.
that's,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know, that is a, you know, like you said, you know, it's just, I suppose, a different approach, isn't it? That's become a real opportunity.
No, it's how, yeah. If you started with a blank sheet of paper and said how are you going to run a site, you would do it in that sequenced,
Mm,
organised manner. But we just know that pre-pandemic, the reality of life, the push to get things done quicker,
mm,
quicker, quicker, meant that things would, you know, that sequence
mm.
disappeared. And actually, we've stopped the merry-go-round and we've restarted it again and reset it, and it's worked out really, really well,
How quickly did
really good.
the, you know, the team on site adapt to that? Was there any friction from the team or from people on the ground?
Um, No, I wouldn't call it friction. I think you've got to go back to last summer as well and just remember what it was like. Lots of people last summer were concerned about whether they'd have a job, how things were going to pan out. So actually, when we did open sites back, I said, yes, we do want you to come on back onto site, but this is the way you've got to work. Yeah, you probably got one or two idiots that said, I'm not going to do this, but then they didn't
Yeah.
work on the site. Generally, I think there's been 95% compliance
I
of
think
what we do.
it's funny when you say if we look back to last summer because of what everyone has been through in the last year. Last summer, kind of each of these lockdowns feels like maybe 10 years apart from each one because it's all been so mad. But yeah, no, if you do look,
No, it would take us 10 years at least to
yeah, I
pay
can
for it all. Yeah.
imagine. How is what are your thoughts on because obviously the construction industry carried on. The government obviously let that carry on, and um, there was a lot of other industries that obviously got stopped and didn't carry on. Did you think that was the right decision from the government to let that continue?
Well, I think it was a bit unfortunate that all construction got
Yeah.
banded together. So actually, a lot of house building did stop. A lot of residential development stopped. We stopped
Yeah.
completely for 8 weeks. Big infrastructure projects continued. If you go to, if you went to something like Hinkley Point, which is like the building of the nuclear
Yeah.
reactor in Somerset, I mean, the health and safety requirements they follow already, I would say they would have been COVID secure before COVID came because they wear masks, the way that they work, the manner that they work. So I could see why big construction was allowed to continue because I do think that it works
Yeah.
extremely well. Smaller construction and residential house building, in my opinion, we all
Yeah.
stopped for 8 weeks. And that, I suppose, that was a bit frustrating because people were saying, "Well, you're still working, aren't you?" And you had to like point out that no, actually, we have closed
How
all of
did
our
that how
sites.
did that feel as a leader to know that none of the site, you were just shut down ultimately for those 8 weeks? How did that feel for you as a leader and for the other leaders in the organization?
So it all just happened so quickly as well. I mean, you look back at it, we literally over the space of 3 days closed every site securely. We can't just close the door and then walk away. So we had to make sure that cavities were protected, cranes were locked and secured, and making sure CCTV was set up so no one can get on the crane and climb up. So all the stuff that we normally do, but we normally lock down over Christmas, but we probably
Yeah.
prepare for it over the course of all
Yeah.
of December, whereas this literally happened over 3 days. So there was a lot of work to do then. And the main thing I think was communicating to people. So we did furlough at the time. We furloughed 90% of staff in that first lockdown. And it was just really keeping them in communication with what the plans were, what we were trying to do. But of course, in that very first lockdown, for the first couple of weeks, we didn't
No,
really know
I
what the
don't think
plan
anyone
was.
did they? That was
We
probably part of the problem.
No, no one did.
So that's
No.
how did you so at that point when you said so most of the staff were furloughed, was that communication really important for those furloughed members of the team as well to know what was kind of going on and
Yeah, I mean, we tried to do. I mean, most of the sort of functional heads would have their team meetings and sort of did social stuff on Zoom and Teams, as like you've read that most people did. So we tried to stay in touch with people. It wasn't easy. I mean, me in particular, I probably wasn't the best at staying in touch with like my furloughed, like my administrator was furloughed, my PA, and yeah, I probably wasn't looking back on it. I probably wasn't the best at staying in touch. I was
yeah.
busy doing things, and I didn't have
It's
a lot to
I
say
suppose
really because we
but it's a
didn't know what
learning
we were
process,
doing.
isn't it, as well? Because you don't realize how people are probably feeling as well, do you? When just not used to this way of working, isn't it? So I think it's all a learning process. Let's go back to the start, Shane. Say, how did
Yeah.
let's go right back to the start. What was your first paid job? What did you first do as your very first paid job?
I suppose my first paid job, I was a paper boy, and then I worked for my dad as a
Yeah,
Saturday boy on his bread and cake
yeah.
round, and that was pretty hard. That was 4 o'clock in the morning. Then I worked at Sainsbury's, so yeah, pretty. I had loads of like
Mm.
studenty jobs throughout most holidays. I was always quite money orientated. That
No,
sounds awful,
yeah. I
but I
mean, no,
was
it's
back then.
good. Going back to, 'cause it's quite an interesting thing, because obviously, I know your dad was a baker. Is that right? Was he?
Of sorts. He didn't do the
He had
baking,
his
but he
own
had his
van.
own.
What
He
sort of
had his own
hours?
business. Yeah,
So
yeah.
he was up at what time in the morning, and what sort of hour?
So he did like 4 a.m. till 2 p.m.
Do
six
you
days
think
a
that
week,
had
50
50
weeks,
weeks a
50
year?
weeks a year.
So we could say he was a pretty hard worker by the sounds of that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Do you think that was
yeah, yeah.
instilled in you, that getting up early and kind of just getting started on the day and working hard?
Oh yeah, 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 completely. I've done like as you do when you go up through
Mm,
managerial levels. I've done all sorts of psychological
mm,
testing, and I did this one about 5 years ago now, which was about what makes you the
yeah,
person that you are. And yeah, the real big feedback about my work ethic was that I had two. I had my dad, and then another friend's dad ran his own business. So like the two strong male influencers in my
yeah,
teenage years, both both ran their own businesses and worked every
mm,
hour possible. Enjoyed the benefits of it. Don't get me wrong. There was nice
mm.
benefits of it, but they worked a hell of a lot. And yeah, I think
Some,
that I still don't like my dad. My dad couldn't take days off because he didn't have someone who could step in
mm,
to do his job. The way he was
mm,
self-employed, and if he didn't get out of bed, then obviously the hotels wouldn't get their
yeah,
rolls and their bread, etc. So he would get out of bed
mm.
no matter what. And I'm sadly pretty much the same. My sickness record over 21
Prolific.
years is
Yeah,
unbelievable.
no. I mean, it's important, isn't it? It's interesting how you say, you know, those two role influences on your life have shaped kind of your work ethic. And do you think the mornings are incredibly important? I mean, what sort of time do you get up? Are you an early riser?
I think lockdown's going
Let's
to have
think about
changed me.
pre-lockdown. Let's think about
Pre lockdown, I used to get annoyed with myself if I hadn't left the house by
yeah,
7:15.
yeah,
So that's a really so there's a set of traffic
mm,
lights at the end of my road, effectively about
mm.
500 yards away. And if I hit those lights and it was at 7:17 or
You get frustrated.
7:16, I'd get frustrated. If they said 7:14, I was
Yeah,
going to have a good day. So, and I've been, we got 4 kids. This house before school can be a bit chaotic. So my sort of my
get out
aim was
there.
always to
Yeah.
get out of the house before they sort of the chaos started. But I got like that's one of the things that lockdown it has made me realise that I could probably did I gain much by being there. So I'd be in the office for 25 to 8. I don't know. It'd be interesting to ask me the question in
Mm.
a year's time whether I'm still getting annoyed at the traffic lights or
Do you think
not.
that's a routine part of your sort of morning routine where you're like, right, I want to be past these traffic lights before 7:15. I want to be in the office. Yeah.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Predominantly I'm a very
Mm.
boring, routine person.
Do you think routine helps is part of why you've been successful in what you're doing?
It helps you it helps you be organised, and if you're organised, you can deal with more. So yeah. I mean, there's stuff like this is going to make me sound awful. Like if at the end of the day my
Yeah.
email inbox has got more than
Mm.
30 emails in, then I'm
Because
not happy.
it feels too disorganized. Yeah, no, that's really
Yeah.
interesting. Is what you when you get to, so let's say take a typical day before COVID. So you're in the office by 7:30 or whatever it is. What's kind of how do you sit there and then plan your day, or have you already pre-planned it the night before?
I've already pre-planned it. So if I've got meetings or I'm meeting people or homeowners or
Mm,
whatever the case may be, I'm a bit sad. I've probably laid in bed before I've gone to sleep and just ran through the
okay.
day in my head. And then when I would get to work, it would be a case of setting up the day correctly. Yeah, I look back at it now, and some of it was madness because by 9:15, I would have like nailed everything that I needed to do, and I'd be like, right, I'm done, and it's 9:15. But that would be when I would then go out. I've got so the area I cover is pretty much southern England, outside of London and the
Yeah.
M25. So I've got roughly 45 developments that I can go
Mm.
to at any one time. So it's at that point you start driving around and seeing the team and how things are going.
Do you say when you said that usually by 9:15 you've pretty much done your to-do list? So do you think that's down to the fact that you're preparing the night before? Because that's an interesting thing that I've read a lot about people
Oh yeah,
that
yeah,
you don't
yeah. No,
write it
definitely.
down.
And
You
also,
you just mentally do it in your head of I need to do X.
no, I do write. I write bullet points down. I got this actually. Look, I mean, we probably won't make any notes. I don't
Yeah.
know, but I've got it. I've
Mm.
got my pad here, which sadly never leaves my side. Um, so the other thing, it was also conscious, is that, and this again changed as my years progressed as an MD. If you work
Mm.
for me, I'm not going to get the best out of you if I'm ringing you
Mm.
randomly at 11, 1, 3. So I try and leave my directors to
Yeah.
themselves between sort of
Mm.
9 and 5. So I'm more likely to speak to them unless there's an emergency, in which case they know
Mm.
they can ring me. But I'm more likely to speak to them before 9
Yeah.
or after 5.
And is that something, so that gives them kind of the freedom to get on with their day and do what they need to do? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
completely.
it makes
Yeah,
makes complete sense.
yeah.
What would what advice would you give to someone? Well, actually, no, let's go back to say, how did you get started in property? Did you first start at McCarthy and Stone, or what was your first kind of recollection of getting going in
Uh,
property, and how did you get into that sector?
uh, so, um, sadly, I was always interested in some favorite school topic
Mm,
was geography. I did, when I look back now, my GCSE and A level sort of projects were based on some form of
mm,
development. I then went and did a degree, which my dissertation was on brownfield development. So I was always interested in it. I mean, when I look back now, I didn't know
mm.
anything about it at all, really. Yeah, quite embarrassing, really, if I look back at it and think what I knew and what I didn't know. When I was at university, you had a placement year. There was a company I was involved. I was interested in
Yeah.
town planning. That's the bit I thought I'd quite like to work in. I wrote a letter to a local planning company, not realising that they were the in-house planning arm of
Okay.
McCarthy and Stone. I met with them and they sort of said, yeah, we do. Luckily for me, the company had just had a placement student the year before and it had gone quite well. So placement students were suddenly a
Yeah.
bit in
Yeah.
vogue as,
Yeah.
if we're honest,
Yeah.
as cheap
Absolutely.
labour. Um, so they liked the idea of having a placement student, and then but they felt I probably wasn't right for the planning bit,
Mm.
which was probably
Why?
correct.
Why not? Why
And I
not?
went to because I wasn't doing
Okay.
a planning degree. I was interested in town planning as part of the way you
Yeah.
get development, but I wasn't trying to be a registered
Okay.
town planner.
It was more
I was
strategic.
more
It was
interested
more
in being
strategic. Mm.
just a developer. So they had something called a land department, which again I'd never heard of. I didn't know companies had a
Mm.
land department. My degree was basically land management, so there was a easy fit. Um, And so yeah, I worked for that year, and it was it was very, very good. I mean, it's quite a well-known story now that I bought two sites that year that were extremely good. So by the time I finished my placement year, I'd already been offered a job for the end of my finals. Um, and yeah, so I started back 2 weeks after
Happy
my last
days.
exam.
What was the how did you feel important going to university was in terms of your for your
Um,
career? Do you think it was
Not probably not
mm,
overly, if I'm honest. I think there's other stuff that I've done since, and I think that's probably something that I would always. I think what my wife's done courses outside of the standard education route, and I think that's probably better. So, well, not necessarily better, but yeah, I don't know. It'd be interesting when my kids get to that point. I won't push them to go to uni just to go to
I
uni.
think yeah.
If they want to go because they've got a particular
Mm,
specialism in something, then I'm very,
yeah.
very supportive. This sounds awful because my
Yeah.
course was not great, and there's a lot of courses out there that aren't great,
Mm,
aren't they? There's a call for
yeah.
everything these days. Um, but what was good was like I did a diploma in surveying 2 years after
Mm,
university, which I did by distance learning. I then did an MBA in 2010, which I did via evening classes for 2 years, and I think those have probably been
mm,
more beneficial.
yeah.
So yeah, I
It's
think
do you, so for someone listening who's, maybe 18, 19, 20 years old, their dream is, to become a property developer, for example. Your advice would it be go to uni, do a property development course, or would it be, do you know what, go and approach some experienced property developers or property people and just get first-hand experience, and you'll learn so much more that way.
I think yeah, it's a hard one to answer because there's so many different
Mm,
types of development, isn't there? Like so, obviously I'm at what was until recently a very big PLC. I think if you want that corporate approach, then probably a university background is going to help. If you're looking to be a successful local developer, then you're probably best to get out there quite early,
mm,
learn the basics. Some of the people locally that have done very well probably started on site originally as
yeah.
could be any role, any tradesman within site. So I think it really does depend on what their interests are. I think I hate the way that property developers are portrayed in the media, and you'll see some flash Harry, and it'll be like, oh, he's a
Mm,
property developer. And you're like, okay, what has he
mm,
actually done? So I'm not overly keen on the word property development. If a property developer, if someone of that age was keen in the industry as a whole, then you do definitely need to know how buildings are built and what
mm.
goes into them.
Why do you think the media? Why do you think Because let's be honest, a lot of property. It seems like the property industry as a whole. You know, or definitely certain sectors. So if we look at estate agents, for example, they don't have the best reputation. And that I'm sure there's a lot of good ones out there that we all know. And why do you think the media are the way they are, and they portray maybe different property sectors in a maybe not so great light?
Oh, it's all based around
Mm,
greed, isn't it? There's an assumption that there's a lot of greed that goes on, and you've got market forces that end up paying X amount of pounds for
mm,
a property, and people just think that there's probably tax loopholes that are used by
mm,
property developers. I don't know. There's just it's very little seen as anything good that they do. Yet I would argue that if you actually go and look at the regeneration of towns, you go and look at something like some of the new estates that have been built, particularly in the last sort of 10 years. I mean, they create a wealth of jobs, and they also create jobs within the areas that they're building. So yeah, I think they get a bad press, but I can't blame them. You know, you look at the sort of bonus that the CEO at Persimmon got a few years ago. You know, it's beyond footballer money. So if footballers get a bad press, then a CEO getting a £75 million bonus, he's not going to get
Definitely
good
not.
press, is he?
No, absolutely. Do you think there's an issue in England with house prices and people being able to get on the market? I know that from your, your organisation is very much at the, the retirement industry, but the retirement sector. But do you think, just in general terms, that there's a real imbalance, shall we say? Because at the moment, the market is, I think we can all agree, the market is very, very strong right now, very buoyant.
Buoyant.
And obviously that's been helped by the government and their initiatives and stamp duty extensions, etc., etc. But do you think there is just a general imbalance, or do you just think it's just a simple supply and demand, and there's not much can be done about it?
Well, ultimately, it is supply and demand. I think there's a lot that can be done about it, and it frustrates me that it's all just seen as, well, you must build on green fields. That there are acres and acres of brownfield development that could take place. I mean, we've lost planning appeals in the last 18 months on sites that are earmarked for employment. And you just know, particularly post-COVID, who is going to go and build an office block at the end of the high street, or who is going to go and build loads of work units that could be used by smaller firms. You know, with this drive to working from home, it's going to be interesting. But there's a lot of policies that currently stop brownfield development within town centres, and if I look at where we live locally, if you just looked at Bournemouth town centre and the amount of buildings that are empty on the ground floor, but actually the amount that are empty on floors 1, 2, and 3, you would be able to get hundreds of new housing or new residential development. So yeah, I mean, I think that's going to be the one of the big excitements over the next 5 years is going to be how high streets are going to regenerate, and they will regenerate. It will be a natural evolution of what will happen. But there's a lot of policies that need to be either ripped up or ignored for a while.
Do you think that's something that the government have got on their radar, that they?
Oh yeah, this government are being very positive about it. I mean, there's some excellent permitted development rights legislation that they put through at the end of last year, and they're definitely saying the right things. The problem is the government can say what they want. Ultimately, the decision comes down to the local planning authority, and we haven't got enough time on this chat to discuss the issues with local planners. Well, not local planners, but the local planning system. But you know that viral clip of the council the other week that went round of the argument between two councillors.
No, I didn't see that. Explain it for our listeners.
There's a viral clip. I think it was in Handforth or something in the north, where there was an argument, and anyway, it all played out on YouTube, and it got quite a lot of press. But it was of no surprise to me, because I've been watching online planning committees for the last for the last 18 months, and I mean, if you ever want to lose some hours in the evening, I'd suggest you watch one of them. And say that, look, that's an issue we've got. I think the government are saying the right thing, but it needs to play out more actively in a local level.
Do you think it's very fragmented, the approach? Just not to go too much into the planning, because I know it's, we could go down a very big rabbit hole here. But do you think that the approach, because it's very, should be a more generalistic approach for the whole country in terms of the way that planning happens, or more technology used, more automation? how could it be improved?
No, I think there should be. I think there should be more empowerment to local planning authorities, but there should be incentives for them to promote development. So if you go back in the late 90s, there was a lot of tax breaks for companies to move out of London and to go into the regions, and that's why you've got different areas have got, you know, JP Morgan exists in Bournemouth because of basically a tax break. And so it's that sort of incentive that's needed. I mean, there's an interesting one at the moment. So if they don't hit their housing supply, a local authority will basically get put into special measures, and the government will then take over the local authority and force planning through. So that would be interesting to see if that actually happens. But I don't think there should be a generalistic approach across the whole country, because different parts of the country are completely different.
No, it makes sense. On the interesting what you said about the high street, because like we said, the high street, the acceleration of, shall we say, in the nicest possible way, the death of the high street, it's, I think we've all witnessed firsthand, haven't we? Even pre-COVID, lots of these shopping centres, were really struggling. High streets really, really struggling. I mean, you go through our town, Bournemouth, and just see, like Westover Road, for example, it's just, shop after shop, isn't it? That's just, where do you see, how do you see the high street changing over the next sort of 5 to 10 years?
You got to get people back into it. So, and that is a big driver, will be getting people back living there. I mean, if you all right, maybe not families may struggle a little bit, but if you were at either end of your sort of life, whether it's retirees or whether it's young professionals, living in the town centre with all the facilities that could be there would be ideal. But it's just not set up correctly. There's bits and pieces happening at the moment that may encourage it, but there needs to be a real strategy around it. It needs footfall. You need people living there to use the stores, and then the actual stores themselves. I mean, God knows, I'm not a retail expert, but clearly retail's going to change. They're probably going to be more like car showrooms, I would have thought, and then you go and order your clothes or whatever you want online, but having seen it maybe in the shops, I don't know. Who knows how retail will plan out? But unless we drive people back into the city centres and the town centres, it's going to be hard. I had a meeting with Plymouth Council about a month ago, and fair play to them. They're being really proactive. They own a number of council sites within the city centre. And they want residential on them. They're unashamed about, pre-COVID they were looking at all sorts of mixed use and put a lot of student accommodation, whereas now they said no, actually we want homes there. And I think that's really good.
Definitely, it'll be interesting to see how it plays out over the next 5 to 10 years, because something's got to be done, hasn't it? Because if you look, like I said, if you look at our local high street, Bournemouth, we're in quite a popular area. We've got a stunning beach. We get a lot of visitors here, but it does worry me thinking about some areas in the country that just aren't as popular, basically. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with that. That leads me on to kind of with what's happening in the high street as well. We're seeing a bit of a boom, definitely an early boom in sort of build to rent. And I know that's something from doing my research that potentially your organisation is looking at getting into. What do you think from a general term, build to rent? Do you think that's a positive for the rental industry as a whole?
I mean, I'm probably not best to speak on open market, apart from to say in metropolitan areas it makes perfect sense to me. I'm not sure what build to rent will look like in a market town, or even maybe somewhere somewhere not as big as a city, but certainly in the metropolitan areas it makes perfect sense. We are very interested in it. Rental for us has been a real boom over the last 18 months. Talked about it for years. We never did it, always found reasons not to do it. We did a bit of a trial over 6 months, and then we've rolled it out across the country, probably doing about 30% of our business at the moment on rentals. And that's without us really pushing
Yeah.
it, if I'm honest. We are looking. There's a site being built at the moment in Borough of London that will be solely built to rent, which we're doing as a bit of a trial, and we'll see how it works. But there's no doubt about it. In the retirement market, there is definitely a demand for rental, and our average homeowners in their late 70s, early 80s. When you think about it, just on a basic terms, it's quite late in life to be doing a large property transaction, whereas a rental transaction appeals more, is easier, appeals to probably the family members more. So yeah, it's something that it's probably been the big success for us in the last 18 months, and we're working rapidly to try and take
Is that
advantage of it.
something with your guys' build to rent strategy at the moment? Is it existing buildings that you've got that you're doing some part sales and you're doing some some build to rent?
Correct. Yeah. So basically, most of our developments, when they launch for sale now, they are
Yeah. Okay,
multi-tenure.
cool. And then this project in London is one that you're doing as a trial, which is a sole. Yeah.
That'll be a
What
solely built to
are
rent.
you
Yeah.
looking at? What sort of amenities are you looking at? And just give us a sort of what your vision would be for that build to rent building based on your target demographic.
So at the moment, it will look and feel like our normal
Mm.
developments. So there'll be a homeowners lounge, there'll be a house manager there. The apartments themselves, we're driving standardisation at the moment. So again, they look no different. It's simply the way that the transaction
Okay,
itself
cool.
is done.
Okay, makes sense. And I mean, emotionally, I suppose, as want to get as less stress as possible, and I can understand why that's something that you guys are looking at doing for your customers. Do you think for, for the build to rent model, there is an opportunity for, national house builders like yourself to do more with the buildings? For example, libraries, maybe sort of games rooms, private kitchens, things like that. Is that something that you guys are interested in and look at, or is it something, do you think it's a bit of a fad,
I
bit of a
mean,
faff?
I sit on a working party that look at our future schemes and what they're going to look like. We look at all
Mm,
sorts of things, if I'm honest. I mean, ultimately, there is a cost to putting all of
mm,
these things in, so it has to work
mm,
out financially. Yeah, I've been around the country to see some stuff that some competitors do, and there's some very nice
mm,
features out there. Um, I'll be keen to see what they look like in
mm.
5 years' time, and what the service charges look like, and how that all adds up. So, yeah, look, we're looking to evolve, but ultimately, it's still got to make
Absolutely.
financial sense.
What's
I think I get where your question comes from. Some of the ideas that open market build to
mm,
rent are doing, and I completely get that. That sort of work, live, and play option within one block. Yeah, completely understand that. It's just not
not
our
potentially your
not our
market?
market.
What do you guys take as an approach to kind of data and research and stuff like that as a large organization? Say, someone from the team says, you know what, I believe that this is something that we should be doing. Do you as an organization go, okay, well, let's research this, let's do some market research? What's your kind of approach to things like that?
Yeah. We've got better at it. We weren't brilliant at it, if I'm honest. And generally, house builders basically aren't the most
Mm,
innovative
mm,
people, if I'm honest. A house is a house, a block of
mm.
flats is a block of flats. You know, how much more
Yeah.
radical can you be? That said, yeah, I've lost
That's
the
all
trail
right.
of thought
No,
on
no
that one,
worries at
Tim.
all. No, it's just interesting. It's really interesting to see, because I personally believe that maybe and it's always that commercial side, isn't it, Shane? That's the thing. It's balancing the commercial with features and benefits and different things that you think you can do. but yeah, the research thing was, yeah.
Oh, sorry, the research and data. Yeah, sorry, yeah. So research and data, yeah, we have improved greatly on that. I mean, there's so much data available now, and up until probably 3 years ago, we didn't use a great amount of it. Now we use a lot. I got far more data available. I don't know what it all
Yeah.
means, but I got far more data available if I want it. So yeah, no, very keen on that. We do a lot of focus groups. We currently got something running this week, looking at our entrances, and that there's 500 members of the public that could be people that would buy into us, that will give their views on that. So yeah, no, it's far bigger part of the
Yeah,
business than it
okay,
used to be.
understood. What's the how are you guys? So we said about talked a little bit about data innovation. How, COVID has really pushed forward ways that we now, if you've got someone looking at an apartment to buy, you know we've got to use technology, because there was a point in time where you couldn't come and see the properties. How have you guys adapted in terms of your technology that you use to kind of sell your properties, or just help people?
Yeah, we'd already had something working on the website anyway, because we have a lot of people move or look to move from outside the area of the development. So, a lot of people will. I've got someone who's moved down to Paull. They've moved
Yeah.
400 miles. So yeah, we've the website's all been sorted so that we can show more virtual reality or real life, actually, isn't it? And, yeah, a few years ago it was virtual reality, but now you're actually seeing the apartment that we're looking to sell. So I think we've adapted to it well. Nothing beats a visit. So the sales offices are open. People can come in. We can do a COVID secure visit. But it has to be a booked appointment. What you can't do at the moment is randomly turn up without announcing that you're coming, which is pretty much like
Yeah,
everything now, isn't
absolutely.
it?
What's been, going back obviously to yourself, Shane? We talked about the influences on you in your kind of early years, with you said your dad with his own business and his work ethic, and there was another person as well. Um, what Since you kind of got obviously started at McCarthy and Stone, what's been the biggest? Have you had any mentors? Have you had any people that are real influence to you?
Yeah, I've got quite a long list, I suppose. Really, I mean, I've had colleagues I've worked with. I mean, my first boss was was brilliant, and he could see that I could do it. He really pushed me. I then worked for then I had a female MD who, when I became a director, she just gave me all the confidence to do the job that I wanted to do and thought I could do. Then I've had someone in land and planning that I've worked alongside with until very recently, who's always been able to. I've been always been able to get advice from. So yeah, I've had 3 or 4 very good, mainly bosses at work that have helped me. And then I've had I've had performance coaches,
Yeah,
mentors, external from
yeah,
outside the company. So I'm probably on about my 4th one of them, because you don't keep them for too long, because otherwise they lose their impact. But yeah, I've had a very good performance. I had a performance coach who had to work on my
okay,
empathy. That was particularly highlighting for both
yeah.
me and them. So yeah, no, it's been very. I've been very lucky. I have been very well supported, whether it's with external coaches or whether it's been internal
Is that something
mentors.
that's interesting, you talk about performance coaches? So is that something that you took on yourself and said, I'm not something that was to do with the company, you decided to do that on your own outside of the company? Or is it kind of,
I'm trying to remember. I think, if I remember rightly, we'd done some teamwork together with the performance management group, and then yeah, there was probably, I think it's psychometrically something came out flagging red, and it was probably proposed that I try and get that to at least an
Okay, all
hour.
right, no problem. So you said some with the performance coaches, you've kind of changed them over time because it becomes, like you said, it loses its impact. So
Yeah,
why,
yeah,
can you
yeah.
talk a little bit more about that?
So I suppose you don't want to become, yeah, you just don't want to become attached to the same one. About 2 years is about right. And you know, they're able to influence you, talk you through different things. But then you want, you know, you always want to broaden your horizons and get new ideas. So like the person who worked on
Mm,
my empathy probably wouldn't be the best person to work on a
yeah,
different aspect that I
improve. Yeah,
may want to work
okay.
on. Yeah,
What
yeah.
did for people out there that are listening right now, so it's interesting to hear that this sort of stuff because I know you well as we know, and I didn't know a lot of these things, and it's how important, would you advise someone to do that? So someone who's running their own business now, they're maybe struck.
Oh, it's a huge, yeah, yeah. It's really really big, and it's yeah. Without going into too much detail, I know
Mm,
other businesses. I got friends that work in different businesses, and they don't do it, and I just yeah. It's a real gap. If you don't do some form of review of yourself, how are you going to
mm,
improve? How are you going to evolve? How are you going to move with the times? How do you know how
mm,
people see you? So it is really good. It's
mm.
not cheap. That probably stops a lot of people doing it. It's probably why local authorities, institutions, education, schools don't do it because it's not cheap, but
Do you say it's a
it is
very,
very good. I mean,
very valuable investment in yourself that you absolutely should do?
yeah, I think my wife read one of the reports once and said, "Well, I could have
Yeah.
told you all of this," which is probably true. And you know, your loved ones are the
Mm,
ones who probably know you best. But yeah, I'm still, you know, uh, my I don't think it's a weakness. My one area that I'm not
mm,
good at is that if people let me down or
mm.
disappoint me, I um, I struggle to let them
Okay.
back in, which is probably why I have a very small network
Okay.
of
All right.
friends.
No, but I mean, so would you say that's say the kind of empathy, that side you said that was something that you wanted to work on. Was that something that you noticed yourself, or did someone else point out to you?
I didn't. It had been it had been raised on a number of occasions. I thought I'd got better once I had
Yeah.
kids,
Yeah.
personally. So I probably didn't think I was as bad at it as others did. Um, but yeah, it was clearly a bit of a red flag issue, and I've worked on it. It's funny. So consciously, once you've done it, consciously you also it fills in blanks and makes you comfortable with decisions that you make in your
Mm,
personal life as well. Because whilst there is a difference between personal and business life, it's
yeah.
still you making
Mm,
that decision. So when I think of some of the things that I have, some of the decisions or situations in my personal life that I may have not gotten into, but the decisions were
mm,
made that were made, I now understand why I'm
mm.
comfortable with
Yeah.
that.
No, it makes complete sense. Did the talking about obviously weaknesses? Let's look at strength. Actually, how important? Sorry, going back to something. So, do you think that's a trait with a lot of people, managers or leaders? Empathy. Do you think a lot of people will struggle with that? Do you think that's like a common trait with people that get to a certain level that actually they don't have much empathy? Because
I
I'm interested
think
in that. That's very interesting.
I I think that people probably think they're very good. They are empathetic until they actually look up
Yeah,
what it means, because that's
yeah,
what it was for me. Um, and I see people that are very very good at it, and I see other people that are poor at it, and the ones that are poor at it, like in 6 months, they're sort of say, "Well, I don't understand why that person's not." doing what I'm asking them to do, or they're not working in the manner that I want them to. And you sort of realise it's all about people management at the end of the day. And yeah, empathy is one of probably 5 or 6 core characteristics. So I'm a lot better than I was.
What are the core characteristics then? So empathy. What are the other core characteristics that you really need to hone in on as a leader to make sure that you're getting the best out of your team?
I've done something recently around resilience, which is really good. Which looks into your mind, your purpose, your physical. So we haven't talked about it, but you should be fit and healthy. You don't see many leaders that are not fit and healthy. We're all probably carrying a bit too much timber, but we get rid of it. But so your mind and heart's got to be in good condition to be a leader. You got to be fit and healthy. As I said, I've done some work recently around my purpose, what it is I'm looking to do, having clear objectives, and my understanding of like my spheres of influence. And there is, like I say, once you open it up into this sort of personal coaching, mentoring, there is so much that you can get into. And it probably isn't for everyone, but I think if you are looking to work at a high level for a long period of time, you'll need it, because it does, as I say, answers a lot of blanks or helps you make decisions that you probably didn't realise you could make.
For someone listening to this that maybe doesn't, because as you said, it can be quite expensive, doing personal coaching. I suppose sometimes you pay for what you get for as well. So, the more expensive the coach, the better the quality. But obviously, I'm sure there are some people that aren't as good, like in anything. What would be your advice to someone that, wasn't able to, afford to get a personal coach? Would you get them?
So I would still, I'd get them to buy people a pint and a sandwich who they like and think they can ask questions with. And there's some very good property associations around. There's an excellent one in Bournemouth, which is basically a networking body, and just a chance to speak to different people like that. For example, there's a solicitor that I will just chew the fat with once a quarter. But that is effectively a style of mentoring, because we're discussing, they can give me feedback, I give them feedback, we discuss different issues that we've got, and it's cost us basically a pint.
So get out, get out. If you can't afford it, get out there, talk to people. It's free, or it's not going to cost you a lot of money, but you need to. I think that's for people, isn't it? They just need to make that step, don't they? Need to get themselves out there, and that's it.
Yeah, you have to be taking feedback is one of the things that you've just got to get very used to. And no matter what you're doing in life, someone along the way is always going to give you a review or feedback, and it's you've got to be able to listen to it and take it all on board. So I think your own personal network can be doing some of that work without paying for a performance
When you
coach.
talked about resilience, Shane, say that's something that's obviously. What do you mean by resilience?
So for me, resilience is like your reaction to issues and problems. How you're. I know my scores, so I'm pretty much like this throughout the day, no matter what has happened. And I never used to be like that. I can look back at times when different people have resigned or something bad has happened, and I've been like, shot up like this. And whereas now I probably don't. Well, I know I don't do it. People probably, someone resigns and I don't really seem to batter an eyelid. Whereas internally I am thinking, right, what's the plan? How are we going to deal with this? What can we do? And that's for me what resilience is about. Is about how you can stop those peaks and troughs, and you can operate at a consistent level. Yeah, so we've just done this work together because we think over the next 3 months, everyone's been working remotely and a different style of working. It's now probably going to start to flip back the other way towards this hybrid model. So I was keen to make sure that my immediate team were ready for it, what signs to look for, make sure they knew what they needed to do to make sure they were resilient and ready. So yeah, no, it's very, very useful. Very useful.
For the resilience, that's interesting what you say about, 'cause, a lot of things happen, especially to leaders, isn't it, throughout the day. Like you said, someone will quit.
Yeah.
There'll be another issue with something else. A customer will be really, really angry on the phone because someone's not done something right, someone hasn't followed the process. We could go on forever, isn't it? And I think, that that resilience and that, would you say, almost calmness
Yeah,
kind
so
of
the sort of
external calmness is
external
important.
calmness, yeah, definitely. Inside you might be going absolutely
Yeah.
nuts, but externally, yeah. And I work in an open plan office, and I've always sort of said, no matter what, I've got to sort of walk around as if I'm having the same day as I have every day.
Yeah.
And then when I get out in the car park, I might swear or kick the car tires or something.
Yeah.
But no, it's all it's very good stuff. I mean, some of my colleagues from it, one of them is highlighted his sleeping patterns completely gone to pieces over lockdown. So he's made a note to himself. He's got to get his sleeping pattern back. Another one has been drinking too much coffee. So we're all in to help each other. So next time, at some point, I'll speak to one colleague and say, how's your sleeping going? The
Yeah.
other one is like said, if we see him on a Teams call after midday, he wants us to ask him what's in his cup, because
Yeah.
if
Okay.
it is coffee,
Yeah.
he will stop. He's got to stop drinking it because it's making him go
Do you think
loopy.
sleep's in, do you think, I mean, I think we all know for everyone sleep's incredibly important. I think that's the hard thing as a leader, isn't it? Or someone that's trying to grow and organize, let's say it's their own company and they're trying to grow something in something huge, but they're working 17, 16 hours a day, barely sleeping because they wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning and all they can think about is, have I got enough money in the account?
Yeah,
What's going to happen if this person, you put so much, I think, a lot of entrepreneurs put so much pressure, or leaders put pressure on themselves. Um, how important do you think is it to get that, to
yeah,
get your,
you
kind
do,
of
but
like your lifestyle, isn't it?
yeah. Your lifestyle's got to be right. Your batteries have always got to be sort of half full. It's a bit of a funny story. We were once doing a round table discussion, and they went round the table asking how many hours sleep everyone had, and
Yeah.
I was last, and I had to change mine because I felt awful because my team were like 4 hours, five, and
Yeah.
I'm sat there thinking, well, I get a good 7.5 hours in, so yeah,
Do you
six.
think that's something that's interesting, isn't it? Because I think a lot of people think when they're starting a business or they're trying to get up the ladder and trying to get to a leadership position or just keep growing within the company, that it's, there's work ethic, isn't there? And there's working almost too much that you're not effective at what you're doing. Do you believe, someone should do 16 hours a day? Or are they better off doing 9 hours a day, 8 hours a day of high quality, effective work
Yeah,
and getting the right sleep and having that balance?
I think everyone's different. Like I've got my ultimate boss. I mean, he does ridiculous hours, but his work he never seems to dip. He just seems to be constantly at that level. So you've each got to be down to your own. I think there's a lot of easy stuff as an individual that you can do. I made a decision very early on. It's very, very rare for me to have a drink between Sunday evening and Friday evening
Yeah,
because I just
yeah,
know I'm not my best the following day. Even if I've just had one, it can affect maybe my sleep or something. And obviously because I do quite a bit of driving. So yeah, I think I got to about 29:30. I think I may have not almost started nodding off on like the M27 or something, and realised there's a change you got to make, but you got to be prepared to make those changes.
yeah. Definitely. I think, like you said, it comes down to self discipline, doesn't it?
Yeah,
And
yeah,
if you
completely.
really, if someone wants something enough, then they're gonna, you've got to make these sacrifices, haven't you, to get to where you want to be. What do you think? Have there been any? Uh, Actually, no. Let's ask this question. What would you say has been your biggest failure? And how did you learn? What's been the biggest takeaway from that? What do you think's been, or what's been your hardest moment in your career or biggest failure? I've got a feeling, knowing you, that I think I might know what it is, but I could be wrong. So it'd be interesting to see what you say.
My biggest failure was for about 3 years. We were building schemes that looked great for brochures, looked amazing when they were built, but our cost control was really poor, and I didn't know enough about it. And I'm very lucky that work stuck by me. I would have fired me, if I'm honest. I mean, we're not talking. I didn't overspend by a couple of $100,000. I think one financial year, I think I was £11 million over.
Yeah.
So yeah, pretty big numbers, and I don't think I reacted to it at the time correctly. I did eventually, I think I was so the outcome in the end was I made some changes. I embraced some ways of working that we weren't doing. Brought some staff in, which is like one of the best moves I made. And but my initial reaction was poor, because I liked the way the buildings were looking. They were selling very well, but it's no point for them selling very well if they're not going to make any money.
Yeah, absolutely. When you said your reaction then, so was why would you say your reaction was poor? Was it
Because
kind of
in hindsight, I probably should have stopped 2 of the projects and said, right, we're not spending any more money until we've got this nailed. But I kept going. So there was 4 projects. They're all in build roughly around the same time, and we kept going. The only thing that saved me was I'd always been asked, or it was instilled in me that if you got a problem, don't be afraid to put your hand up. So I put my hand up after the first month and said, we've got a problem down here. Build costs have shot through the roof. We're not in control of it. 4 million this month, next month, and everyone else. So at the time there was 9 other regions and 9 other offices. The 8 other offices were all reporting consistent costs. So I was the outlier, and the only thing that saved me was 6 months later, another office flagged it.
Yeah.
Another office flagged it, and basically over the course of the following 18 months, every office had faced the same problems. It was an industry-wide problem at the time, really.
Yeah. Yeah.
But we had flagged it early and hadn't tried to hide it.
So do you think your biggest takeaway from that for other people listening is, don't try and, put your hand up, ask for help, get the
Always
help you need.
put your hand up and ask for help before you start drowning. And secondly, always be in control of your costs. It doesn't matter whatever your property development scheme is, or what you're proposing to do, whether it's an extension in your house, or 30 houses, 200 houses, whatever the case may be. If you're not in control of your costs, it doesn't matter what your sales revenue will end up being. You're not going to make the money you should be making. And
So is that always the discipline then? Always control your costs first.
Yeah.
And okay, makes sense.
That's what your profitability is all about, is controlling your costs.
Absolutely. What's the one thing you wish you'd known before? Say, if there was something what was the one thing you wish you'd known before you began your career that would have helped you even more? Is there anything that you wish you'd known?
Anything I wish I'd known? Nothing. Oh, that sounds awful. Nothing like nothing springs to mind. I mean, I wish I had like a better understanding of financial markets, and I could, called a couple of recessions maybe or something. But no, there's nothing. I think there's nothing. I was always in a rush to do things when I look back in like my 20s. I probably could have slowed down a little bit, but I still would have been where I am now, I think.
Do you think it's important? Because when you say about being in a rush, I think that's maybe another trait of people that are quite successful, because you've got that sense of urgency to make something of yourself or of your company. Do you think that's something that people might regret when they look back on their career, that they weren't very present in their career? Or do you think it's not something that you think is
I
just
don't know
part
if
of
it.
who
I
you
think
are?
if anything, you'll be more present in your career. It's whether you're
Mm,
more present in your personal social life. Yeah, I made quite a decision. You know enough about me. I made a
mm,
decision quite early on that I probably got more serious about
mm.
work several years before my friends did.
Yeah, yeah,
Some of them even decades, Tim.
absolutely. No, I definitely know that.
No, you know what I mean.
So, yeah,
Yeah, it was a conscious decision.
absolutely. I think that's the part about, I think for anyone, for people listening, especially the younger people that will be listening, I think that's really important that, to have a really successful career, I think you have to be aware that sacrifices are made, and sometimes that even comes at the expense, unfortunately, of relationships, isn't it? That
You have
just,
to, yeah. At some point, you have got to commit to your. Depends how far you want to go, but at some point, you do need to commit to your job or your business.
mm,
And then it's not for everyone. Don't get me wrong.
mm. What's the if you could step into my shoes, okay? What what would you have asked yourself that I didn't? Just for, any listeners that might be
Shall we,
thinking of,
shall we ask that social media one?
yeah,
Because you
let's talk
tried to
about
do a bit
social
of.
let's talk about social media then. So you mentioned to me before we started that you're not really on social media. Um, what's so yeah, tell us a little bit more about that.
And it's an interesting one because I'm at a bit of a crossroads with it at the moment again. So I decided very, very early on that I wasn't going to do it for a couple of reasons. There was a selfish one around I wanted my non-work life to be my private life.
Yeah.
So there's a bit of a funny story. My wife,
Mm.
who is on social media,
Yeah.
um, this is going back years ago,
Mm.
put some pictures on. I think we'd been at a wedding, and I went into work on the Monday, and like walked in, and a whole group of people did this like pose that clearly I was doing at
Yeah.
midnight on the Saturday night, and I was
Yeah.
like, I didn't like it.
Yeah.
So that confirmed I wasn't going to do it,
Mm.
and I've stuck with it. So it's kept my private life private. And then the other element is that publicly,
Mm.
I think as social media has developed, I think for you to I think you have to be absolutely on it.
Yeah.
So if you're going to do Twitter and Instagram and all the other different platforms you can do, it
Mm.
doesn't, you can't do it and then not tweet anything for 4 months.
Yeah.
Because that means, what are you doing? You've got nothing to say. So I've
Mm.
sort of taken a decision to not do any of it.
Mm.
Um, and people, you can find me online if you need to, and there's plenty of like press stuff on there, etc. But it's
Mm.
funny, particularly on in lockdown, I've had a number of or meetings virtually with people for the first time,
Mm.
and all of them said, "Well, I don't know anything about you, Shane, because I'm not on LinkedIn,
Mm.
but I'm on a crossroads because I sort of feel like I should be on LinkedIn."
Mm.
But it would go against everything I've said beforehand. So yeah, currently I've stayed off it, and I don't
Mm.
think I suffer because of it.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. So I suppose, for you, you work within an organization. Do you think it would be important for someone
Oh,
who
if I
ran their
was,
own
yeah,
organization?
if like for you, for example, I think you
Mm.
should be all over it. But if you're
Mm.
gonna if you're gonna be all over it, you got to do it properly.
Yeah, it
So I
sounds
think that, as a company, yeah, we've got our own Twitter handle. I don't know if we've got Instagram. I know we've got Facebook.
mm,
Um, and someone does that. There's a department that do it, and that's great. But as an individual within that big corporate, I wouldn't do it. But for someone like yourself,
mm.
I think it's the way ahead. You've got to be, yeah, you got to commit to it.
You are, I think you are your brand, aren't you? You know,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
are your organization. So, how successful? So, because it's interesting, because with your demographic, you know, obviously retirement age. Have you found that you're kind of that department that deals with that something that's been advantageous to you? Because I think people. Do you think it's been something that's been successful for you? Have you sold properties through social media?
Oh yeah. The social media bit, and we got onto it relatively early, and I mean, certainly for the last 10 years, we've had some
Mm,
sort of footprint on it. We probably don't do enough of it, if I'm honest. It's not an area I particularly pay a lot of attention to. I mean, I can see
yeah.
I can go on our intranet and see our Twitter feed, and it tends to be quite generic, tends to be quite brand building,
Mm,
which is good. So no, I mean, again, my frustration, and I was looking something last night personally, trying to find a tradesperson, and I saw that they had a Twitter page, and I went on it, and they haven't tweeted since 2016. Well,
what's the point?
what's the point?
Yeah, no, absolutely agree. Absolutely agree. I think, you know, like you're saying, if there's someone, you know, for the people that are listening out there, especially if they've got their own businesses and they're trying to grow, they should definitely. It's very, very important, isn't it, to be all over social media or to look at your target customers and where your target customers are, and to make sure that you're using that medium or that
Yeah,
platform to
yeah,
reach out to them. So, just conscious of time, so
yeah.
we're going to wrap up
Very
with
good.
our signature question. Okay. So, what are the three, you know, for everyone listening out there who's interested in property and maybe forming a career in property or they're working in it, what do you think the three most important skills are you need to master if you want to be successful in property as a leader?
Crikey. Uh, you do need to know. You, Going back to that cost bit, and it's really boring, but
Mm.
you do need to know what two and two equals.
Yeah.
You know,
So,
the
understand your
number. You got
numbers.
to know your numbers. You got to understand your numbers. You got to be prepared to take risks, but they should be considered risks. So you go into it knowing what the risks are and what the likelihood of them are. But you should
Mm.
be naturally someone who is on the side of risk. Um, and the third one, I think you do have to have a natural enjoyment for it. It is quite vocational, if I'm honest, which is good. It should be something that interests you, whether it's the design element, the sales piece. You do find that people that work in it for their whole life.
Mm. Yeah.
People don't
No, that's
tend to dip in and out. They tend to be in it for their whole working life.
for the long haul. Well, thanks so much, Shane. Really appreciate your time today. Okay.
That's all right, Tim. No
Um,
worries. Thank you very much. That's been very good.
yeah, that's a quick hour and 20 minutes. That's flown by.
Excellent.
So hopefully it has for you.
All
So
right.
no, appreciate you joining us and take care.
No worries. Cheers. Bye bye.